Hello, my name is Dries, and today I would like to introduce to you the Internet of Things Design Kit. And I specifically want to focus on how I've been using this kit together with the Miro board, which I created for it, and how it can help you in defining and making your internet connected product ideas explicit at a very early phase in a product design process. Before I dive into the actual Miro board, I'd like to briefly spend a little bit of time on how this design kit came to be, what it can do, and when it makes most sense to use it. So the Internet of Things design kit is basically a modular set of components. It's a modular kit consisting of different design tools. And in essence, you can basically use any component of the kit at any moment in the ideation process. There is no set linear structure to follow, basically. Although that we did create a couple of ways that you can combine different tools part of this kit. Now, what do I mean by a design tool? In this case, it's mostly a collection of templates and card sets. And depending on what you're after, whether that is a strategic exercise or whether it's more a product-oriented exercise or whether it's more data-oriented, it's all pretty feasible to find an activity which is part of the design kit, which hopefully can fulfill the needs of a creative team. So this design kit was created with different teams or different team compositions in mind. It makes sense to use this in a corporate environment, but it also makes sense to use it in a startup or SME context. It's very much scalable to whatever size is needed or whatever direction that you want to take here. As I said, we've been using this to do strategic exercises in corporates, but we've also done this to make a product idea explicit to facilitate communication between a designer and a developer in a small or medium-sized enterprise. So what makes this design kit so special or different, or what I think really sets it apart from other things that I've seen in this space, is that it has this modularity to it, so you can combine different parts. But what I like most about it, or what people react very positive on, is that we offer different, or we recognize that different projects compositions or different project steps are possible and feasible to cover with this kit. And we immediately show this. We immediately show this by offering very distinct starting points. So, based on our experience, the Internet of Things design process, there is no such thing as one IoT design process. It's always different. It always depends on context. It depends on existing knowledge in a team. It depends on maybe legacy products, those kind of things. And we recognize this also in the design kit, where we say a project can start from an existing idea. So that's one entry point. This means you already have an idea and you want to validate whether it makes sense, whether you've covered everything, whether you can improve it, yes or no. So that's one starting point. Another starting point would be starting from an existing product or service. So this is one which happens very frequently in practice, where a product is on the market or a service is already available. And you basically want to figure out what would happen if I make this internet connected. Would it still be valuable? Would it still be meaningful? Those are the most important questions to ask, that you're not just putting a connected chip or connected hardware in your product, but you don't really know what you want to do with it in the end. Then a third starting point is starting from a problem. And that means that you'd start from an observation that you did in the world, and you think you can solve this by proposing an internet connected product. Last possible starting point, which is part of this design kit, is starting from a technology. This means that you have done a very specific technological development, which somehow relates to internet connectivity. But you don't really know like where, in which context, in which setting can I apply this. So that's where that starting point comes in. It's really all about figuring out or exploring what kind of contexts are possible. For the sake of the exercise in the introduction today, I will primarily be focusing on the product starting point, since that is the one that basically happens or is most frequent when you look at projects that at least I've been involved in. Usually there is some kind of existing product or some kind of existing product context, which is explored and figured out. How can a internet connected product make sense here? So that's the starting point, and I think this is what really makes the IoT Design Kit unique in its genre of design kits. What also makes it little bit special is that it includes other proven design tools. So if you were to download this kit on the website which we made for it, iotdesignkit.studio.be, you'd probably see some things like if you'd scroll through the different components of it, for instance, if you would look at understanding, which is like understanding tools which help you understand a context or which help you understand a specific stakeholder. There are tools there which might ring a bell if you're familiar with these kind of design tools. For instance, customer journey mapping, product lifecycle analysis. We don't pretend to reinvent the wheel here. So we basically incorporate existing methods, existing tools into the design kit since they make sense in defining an IoT product idea. So there's a whole bunch of tools in there, and we will only be focusing on a couple in the Miro board today. But I hope that will at least get you the most important messages will come across based on that introduction. There's a whole lot more to be found, to be explored here. So I strongly suggest, like in your own time, have a look at the IoT Design Kit website in order to figure out all of the parts of the design kit. Something that I didn't mention yet is in the question that I get often is like, when do I use this kit? And what I typically suggest or say to people is that there is a very important step between coming up with an idea and making a first prototype. There's like a kind of fuzzy thing in between there. And it's that part is really about making your idea or your concept explicit. It's about communication in teams. It's basically the designer being able to talk to the developer being able to talk to the marketing person being able to talk to the business developer or the CEO of a startup or of a company. It's all about, is everyone on the same page regarding the whole idea that we're building here? And sometimes you would have an idea and you would make a first prototype of it, and then it would actually result into discussions. Oh, but this is not really what I meant, and then that leads to frustration in teams as not everyone is on the same page regarding the initial concept. So the IoT Design Kit really is a tool which can help creative teams in making their choices or making their design choices explicit at a very early stage in the process. So you won't be talking about technology as much. You won't be talking about very detailed elements of a concept, although that's possible using the tools, but it's not the initial goal. It's more about laying down the big building blocks of an idea and really knowing what is it that we're going to be making. So the IoT Design Kit, therefore, is a set of tools, modular set of tools, which sits in between. I have this marvelous idea, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I want to now start making a prototype out of it. It's like this tool that covers the little adventure in between those two steps. Okay. So the IoT Design Kit is available as a downloadable set of PDFs, which can be printed if you want to do it like the old school way. But since the recent Corona happenings, we've moved to facilitating online workshops with the design kit. And for that, we created the Miro board, which I now would like to introduce to you. So switching over to that tab, uh, if you would see the Miro board, it would look like this. Let me first go over the major blocks here. So you see a set of common resources. Those are cards. You'll see another set of cards, wildcards, and another set called miscellaneous cards, or yeah, expectation cards. So those are the resources which we'll be using on the templates that you see on the left-hand side here. So this example case block, that's really what we should be looking at right now. On this board, I've used an example. I've written down an example which can help you in your first an exploration using the IoT Design Kit tools. As I think these kind of design kits, they don't really have a lot of value if you just give blank templates. They like fill in the boxes and everything should be fine. No, I try to like give a little example case here, which hopefully makes sense. If you run through this example, you'll have some basic understanding of which tools are in the design kit, and you can then apply them in your own context or your own business. Okay, so the example case which I'm introducing here is starting from a product. So we already have an existing product. We are, in this case, a hard hat producing company. So that means construction workers or people active on a construction site, they have to wear protective helmets. That's what we're focusing on. This is what the product that we make. For this, I created a fact sheet. And basically what you see in the fact sheet, it is a collection of other IoT Design Kit templates. So it's a little bit messy with the red lines, but I really wanted to have them in just to show you that everything on the fact sheet does not appear out of thin air. So we have a couple of templates out of the IoT Design Kit, which are linked here. And basically, I created this fact sheet to consolidate some information without having to switch between all of those templates. So I will just zoom in a little bit more. So what we have here is a understanding template. This is a customer journey mapping template. We have another understanding template, which is a life cycle analysis template. Then there is something about opportunity mapping. I will get to that in a minute. Two very important templates are framing template and an expectations template. So suppose that you would run through all of these exercises separately. You could come up with a fact sheet like this. And this is like a summary of all the other things that you could have done. So in this case, it's starting from this hard hats producing company, which is a company that is producing a product right now. So this current product block, that comes from the framing exercises. Framing exercises are exercises which make your existing product as explicit as possible. So we're not thinking about new ideas. We're not thinking about new developments yet. This is basically an as-is situation. What is our product? And sometimes this is already pretty hard to fill in. So in this case, my product allows construction workers to protect themselves when working on a construction site so potential injuries are prevented. That's our current product, no more, no less. Then something, at least in my perception, super important comes into play, and that's the expectations part. You previously saw that I have on the Miro board in the common resources a couple of expectation cards. And these cards, they can come in super handy when you're figuring out what is my strategy, what do I expect of an internet connected product. And they can be used to just flip through. So I will just flip through a couple. So you see here, I want to offer a hardware product to complement my service offering, or I want to create a better product for my target audience. Or something that happens quite a bit is I cannot stay behind on the IoT trends. Um, or maybe more specific, I want my product to be self-learning. So a whole lot of possible expectations, like this company or this organization is expecting something from making their product internet connected. And if you use these cards together with the expectations template, which I've summarized on the fact sheet, but is in full glory, also available in the design kit, you can go a bit deeper into these expectations together with the team. In this case, you would take the card, you would place it on this template, and then you would what you actually want to achieve by digitally connecting your product, and why haven't you done this yet? Like, what is stopping you from doing this? So I hope you feel that this is a very strategic exercise. This is figuring out what is the strategy or what are our strategic directions that we want to take with creating an internet connected product. I'll just give you one example here. It's a pretty blunt one, but it's also, sometimes it's what it comes down to. So the expectation here is that, okay, I want to create an IoT product because I want to increase my market share. And you can go a bit deeper and answer the question, what do you want to achieve by digitally connecting your product? Oh, I want to develop a new unique selling proposition to stand out in the market. That's pretty obvious. And why it doesn't exist yet? Okay, in this case, we are a hard hat producing company. We make the best quality helmets. So our focus has always been on quality, on safety, on making good products, but we've not really been focusing on innovation that much. So our focus needs to broaden a little bit from purely on quality focus to an innovation focus. So that's pretty clear. This probably means that you should also be looking at a change trajectory, which is not part of the design kit, but it can be a result of this exercise. So going forward, we have on top here a life cycle analysis of the hard hat, and on the bottom we have a journey map of the hard hat. Again, I want to stress, this is all existing situation. This is really getting to know who are the stakeholders, what are the current problems, where do opportunities lie, what have we explored already, where do things go wrong. That's really what we're trying to get to at this point. We try to figure out the opportunities which are in the middle here. And I won't go over all of them. I will go over a couple. Like, for instance, the journey map is always nice to go through because it really explains a little bit the story behind the whole product. In this case, work Jim arrives at work, takes his helmet out of a locker. He puts the helmet on, but he has these special kind of helmets which have a securing strap at the bottom, but he's negligent and he forgets to tie the straps. At some point during his day, a loose stone falls and the stone knocks off the helmet of Jim's head. Jim falls to the ground, but coworker Patty, she doesn't notice immediately that something was wrong. And at some point, Patty does notice and reports the incident. So this story, as you can probably feel, already triggers different kind of opportunities. For instance, Jim is negligent to tie the straps, or maybe some kind of control system could be implemented. Or Jim's arrive at work, takes the helmet out of the locker. It could also be like a check-in, check-out system. Linked to take the helmet out of the locker, that just checks me in and I don't have to use the badge or whatever anymore. Other things which are listed on here is like environmental monitoring. It could be part of the helmet. So you feel that in this opportunities part, you're starting to make the transition from I have well analyzed the current situation and I am now ready to progress to figuring out which opportunities surface. And that's a pretty important step. That's a really important step to get to at this point. Um, Skipping forward a bit, because I want to introduce, like, hopefully some more parts of the IoT Design Kit. And this is where Miro really shines. This is what I really love about the Miro tool and the Miro board, is the next step. And that is the system mapping step. The system mapping step, or the system mapping tool, comes down to, it's actually pretty simple, but Miro makes it so easy to use that I hope you like it too. So what we do in system mapping is we have different cards, which we take from the common resources. I have selected a couple already, but let me just go over them first. There are 4 types of cards. There are orange cards, which are person cards. So these are all stakeholders which might be present on the construction site. We have construction workers, visitors, supervisors, family members. They are linked to your job in definitely a very direct sense. We have doctors, neighbors, any kind of people. There's always also blank cards, so if we are missing anyone, we can create them as we go along. Person cards are the first card. Second cards are environment cards. Environment cards are environments relevant to this context. So we have inside a crane, offshore maybe, the construction site itself, a high-rise building, a rural area, or a city, or any other type of environment that you can think of. And we have objects that are the green cards. These are basically any kind of object which could be present on a construction site. Obviously, a helmet is there, but we also have gloves, car, shoes, hand tools. Won't go over all of them, but you get the idea. So we have objects, environments, and persons. That's the most important. 3 cards. And then we have an interaction card. And the interaction card is there to link other cards together. And what I mean by that will hopefully become clear now. So I made on my system mapping part of my canvas or of my Miro board, made an example here. So we have a person, a construction worker, and we have a helmet. So I mentioned before, this can be used for instance, environmental monitoring or check-in, check-out. That was the one that I mentioned also before. So at some point, the construction worker will put on or wear the helmet. So we use a interaction card between a person card and an object card to make this an explicit action that is being done. So the construction worker puts on the helmet. This is the first, could be the first part of our system map. We have 2 icons on the interaction card. The left icon is like 2 little hands, which means that it's a physical interaction. And the other icon is a chip, which means that it's a digital interaction. Distinguishing between those 2 is interesting because it will show you later on, as your system map expands, whether you have physical interactions and digital interactions. And that can be interesting for either physical product developers or digital hardware people who want to later on develop specific components or parts of your product. So if you want to expand this, it's pretty easy. So what I did is that when Jim takes out the helmet, puts on the helmet, I created this other object which was not part of the predefined set, which is the human resources server. I created this as an object. You could also create this as an environment, but I kind of preferred to have it as an object. So what I can then do, and this is what I really like about Miro, I can just move the cards around and I can introduce my server, and I have an interaction between the helmet and the server, being that the helmet submits the work. I can add other things, for instance, to be sure or be more sure that these working times are correct, maybe I would need some data to truly validate that this kind of that the work is being done at the correct position or correct place. The construction site environment can provide location data to the helmet, and this can be also included in the HR server. So this is how you start building your your system map. And I think it shouldn't be too difficult to then envision, for instance, let's say we copy the safety inspector card, we move it to our system map. The safety inspector can then consult the data on the HR server, for which I add another interaction. There we go. I will copy some text. And it's always very important to make this as explicit as possible. So consult, say safety data or recordings, recorded data. There we go. And this is, I've now created this interaction. It makes perfect sense, but I have forgotten a pretty important thing, and it's something that, it's something that people often forget. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying the safety inspector interacts with the HR server. Okay, that's possible, but that's doesn't really make the interaction very explicit. I am not saying how this data is being consulted. So what I need to do ideally is to move this a bit to the right and introduce, for instance, and I'm going to make this very high tech, I need to introduce another object through which the safety inspector can consult or view this data. So let's say that we want to go like high tech here. We do like an AR glasses, augmented reality glasses, which the safety inspector wears, and those actually interact with our data. And we would need to add another interaction here, which would then be the safety inspector glances at glasses, something like this. So what I've done now is I've introduced this other object, the AR glasses, because it will be this device which the safety inspector would be actually looking at in order to consult the data which is coming off this helmet on the server. So what I have not done yet is indicate whether these are digital or physical interactions, and I hope it shouldn't be too difficult. The data consultation is definitely digital, and glancing at a pair of glasses is a physical interaction. So what I really like about making these kind of mappings of an internet connected product is that you can immediately see, you can approach this in very different levels. So we are not talking about technological solutions. We are not talking about which database type is being used. We are not talking about which sensor is being used to do this. Now we're talking about the overarching story. And for instance, we could now suppose that I could now focus on, okay, how do I want to do this in the helmet? I would probably need some kind of PCB, or I need some kind of sensor there. Which sensor can I use? But that information, that doesn't make too much sense to someone who eventually would need to do the marketing of this product. They are interested in, okay, I need to sell this product to both the worker and the safety inspector. What are the actual things that are at play here? So it's important that both people part of the design team understand the whole concept here and understand the nuances that they want to put in there. But at this point, we're not making it too focused on either a very technical definition or either a very design driven definition. No, it's really, this is a common understanding of our whole design team about the concept that we're building here. So that should be like a potential result of a system map. It could look like this. It will probably be a bit more complex. What I didn't mention yet is that sometimes you will find that the grid-based system is a bit too limiting, but luckily in Miro, you can just very easily start drawing connectors to any other cards, and then you can add, or you can change the line type to like a dashed line or whatever, change the color, change the thickness, and then you can start adding words to your system map. So there is no real rule. I like to stick to the grid-based system and try to figure out how it makes sense like that. But sometimes you really need some kind of annotation, for which the Miro tools are just excellent. You find them on the left here, as you would do in any other kind of Miro board that you're creating. The nice thing about Miro is that you can just pick up any element, move it about, undo, save it, which is something that is much harder to do when you're working on paper. Although the paper aspect does also have its advantages. What I really like about doing the system mapping in Miro is that it allows you to go back, to edit, to save and share with other people. Okay, so system mapping covered. We can then go back and look at our common resources where we have some wildcards. We haven't looked at them yet. So suppose that you have done this system mapping, the wildcards are created to challenge this system. So if you look at them, for instance, what happens when the battery runs out? Okay, we have this helmet on and it checks in and checks out, but if the battery is dead, does this mean we need to ask the worker every evening to like plug in the helmet or to charge it somehow? There are questions, relevant questions we need to ask. For instance, like this is an important card as well. Is it possible to upgrade, change or repair your hardware and software? I could imagine that a hard hat with a connected hardware element in it could start with, for instance, a check-in, check-out system, but maybe within 2-3 years, we can upgrade the software running on the helmet in order to allow for more functionality. That's the beauty of the internet connected products, is that you don't really need to stick to one function which you give it when you launch the whole thing. No, you can gradually update and change your functionality as your product is being used. But you, of course, need to think about this consciously. If you don't think about it at the start of your design process, it will be a lot harder to implement it afterwards. So these wildcards, we just created a little selection here. They can challenge your system map, and then you can start iterating on whatever it is that you created here. As a last step of this Miro board, and this is also the last step of the IoT Design Kit, we introduced the stress tests. And I won't go through this in detail because it should be pretty self-explanatory. But stress test is really created to consolidate your created idea or ideas. So whereas in the beginning we had this fact sheet really consolidating the starting situation of a product design process, the IoT stress test consolidates the result. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. The stress test is a template in which you answer a couple of questions about primary functionality, secondary functionality, data sources, context of use, and then you get to a value proposition sentence. So that's what happens here. And to fill this out, you basically, on the Miro board, you can just use the text tool and just start typing. So what is the core functionality of our hard hat? And this is already a question we should ask ourselves. Are we still focusing on the quality of the helmet? So is safety and providing worker safety still our core functionality? Or should we be considering shifting to another business? For instance, should we be more towards the human resources side? Should we be more like selling the time tracking as a core functionality and taking the hard hat as a secondary thing, maybe? Which could be a question. But I can imagine that the core functionality will still remain providing worker safety. There we go. Might be a bit large, but should be adaptable. And my primary user is still the construction site worker. There we go. So the core functionality, if we leave it like this, is not the connected product element here. So that's always an interesting discussion to have in this kind of setting. So we could also say here, for instance, time tracking of workers based on helmet usage could be our primary functionality as well. But then we're not making it explicit that we're clearly shifting. It's like a strategic company shift from very quality, best hard hats in the world focus to a more like another kind of service that we are offering or developing here. So it's this all triggers discussion. That's the whole point of the design kit as well. It's not, you will not like be able to fill this out and just go through all the questions and done. No, it's really about letting you think, letting you consider different things, letting you talk to different people, those things. Secondary functions that are, I briefly mentioned it before, you can start focusing on what else can I do? What else can I improve? Suppose that I have a basic starting point. I don't need to include all the functions on launch, but I can also is another square, and in which context this is being used. And if you have all those filled in, you can say, okay, this product is created for, it addresses a certain issue, it uses a certain data, some kind of data-driven information coming from sensors, for instance. It is the only product category which delivers a specific outcome or benefit. Also here, this kind of little value proposition, it's not something that we have created ourselves. It comes from another design kit, which is linked or into this one because it's really good and it makes a lot of sense to do this. So other parts of the stress tests are future implications. These questions, if you would go through them, they really focus on, did you think about the future of your product? The problem with an internet connected product is that you need to think about what happens if I shut my server down and I have sold 10,000 connected hard hats and they're all connected to my server. Is that what I want? Do I need to provide other ways to offer connectivity? Do I need to keep my servers alive for a set amount of time? That are questions that you can ask regarding future implications. And digital connectivity is all about, are you using all potential that you have when you're creating some kind of digital data? Did you consider that you can integrate with external data sources, for example? What would happen if you would offer your data as an open data source for someone else? Is this something that you want to do? Is this something that you don't want to do? So it's, again, a couple of things to consider as you're going through this. And then the last part of the stress test is a value impact matrix. And the value impact matrix, you're trying to figure out which value are we creating or which value do we need to give in. For instance, in the case of a company, there is a value loss here because we need to invest in server or in servers and data storage. That's a clear investment that needs to be made, but the value gain could be that we are really claiming a, a top position in the market because we're offering like a radical new product. Same, you could do the same like for the stakeholders. The value gain could be, in this case, suppose that we do this time tracking, which time tracking functionality. It could be more better detailed time tracking sheets. But the value loss for a stakeholder or a user of this helmet, in this case, that's what I'm like referring to, is that I would need to give up some of my location privacy because the helmet is then tracking where I am around the construction site. A contextual gain, and that's more like gains or losses for society. Contextual gain would be, for instance, less injury, because suppose that you know where everyone is at a certain point of time, there would be less injuries happening on a construction site, which is interesting for a broader societal picture. The little dots in the middle here, they allow you to make the trade-off between is this eventually a company gain or a company loss? So you can maybe it's something like, I'm just like guessing something at the top of my head. I suppose that we want to color these using some Miro tools. Stakeholders, maybe it's a little bit more on the loss side, and the societal might be a bit more on the gain side. So this kind of wraps up the IoT stress test, where we have now defined which value are we actually creating. And this is really a reflective exercise and can sometimes lead to very long and difficult discussions, but it's super important to have these because there's so many products on the market right now which use connected technology in a way that it's more used as a gimmick. And doing this kind of exercise, it truly allows you to reflect very consciously on which value are we actually creating. And as a last step of the stress test, you can say what your next step would be. Like, I think this has little value. I think maybe I can use an off-the-shelf product to integrate with, or I would need to explore this further. So none of these are better than the other. It's more like, again, making an explicit and conscious decision. And that wraps up the Miro board. As I said, the full IoT Design Kit is more elaborate than this. But if you're starting to use these kind of tools, and I specifically focus then on the system mapping tools, so making these connections between people, objects, environments, that can really help you in your team or as a person, as an individual, even as a student. This makes perfect sense to lay out your internet-connected product idea in this way. There are contact details on the Miro board, which I will zoom into here. Feel free to reach out through iotdesignkit.studio.be, and we'd be happy to help or make things more clear if there should be any questions. So that was it for me. I hope this explanation has been not too lengthy, and it has been insightful and useful to get started using the Internet of Things Design Kit's Miro board. Thank you so much and have a nice day.